It's 10 o'clock and now BBC Radio 3 presents an unusual and sometimes disturbing programme marking Halloween. Over the centuries, there have been countless reports of ghosts and ghouls, but the line between fact and fiction has always been unclear. Matthew Thweet and his guests star in Free Thinking Ghostwatch.
Thank you, Al. It's Halloween. Halloween 1992, a Saturday. We're watching BBC One. We've had the 9 o'clock news. The preview of Sunday night schedule has told us to expect last of the summer wine. And John Ketley has told us to expect brisk wind.
It's a chilly Halloween at the moment. Temperatures down to 0 over parts of Norfolk, but the temperatures will rise as the night goes along as the wind...
And the next programme, it's called Ghostwatch. New title, but the format is familiar. Fox Watch trained live infrared cameras on urban nature. Hospital Watch gave us a live relay from A&E. So Ghostwatch looks like it's going to do the same for ghosts. It comes from a studio presided over by a familiar and reliable broadcaster, in this case, Michael Parkinson.
The programme you're about to watch is a unique live investigation of the supernatural. It contains material which some viewers may find to be disturbing.
And it has a bank of telephonists ready to take your calls on 081 811 8181. An academic expert on hand to comment. An outside broadcast van relaying reports from another reliable and trustworthy figure, Sarah Green. But Green is reporting from an apparently haunted house. And what happens there is going to cause a crisis. Institutional, epistemic, professional. Ghostwatch looked like live factual TV, but it wasn't live and it wasn't factual. It was a scripted drama that used the grammar of live television to terrify a nation, rather more effectively than its makers intended. But we are live tonight, so who knows what might happen as we evoke and investigate the pleasures and traumas of Ghostwatch. Here to do that are the creative team who made it 30 years ago. Stephen Volk, its writer, and its director, Leslie Manning. Now, this is a landmark, a recognised TV classic, but it's also a little bit obscure. It's never been repeated, so let us be kind to those not steeped in its mythology and its drama. And just describe what viewers saw on that night, Stephen. When we tuned in, where were we and what did we see?
Sorry, I didn't have my headphones
you
on
don't
properly
need
then.
them.
All right. Where were we?
Yeah.
We as the makers.
No, what were we seeing on the screen? What was the environment of this show? What did the viewers see?
Well, in a way, the core of Ghostwatch was about a family in trauma, as you say, and it was a family called the Early family with 2 daughters, absent father, and they'd been befriended, if you like, by an investigative, psychical investigator, as we called it in those days. Now probably paranormalist would be the accepted word, Dr. Lynn Pascoe. But the wraparound story around that is that the full force of the technical scientific know-how of the BBC for one night only is descending on this house to apply scientific rigour to the one unassailable question that humanity has always had. Do we live after death? And how are they going to do it? They're going to apply all the rigour of an outside broadcast to bring you live a ghost hunt.
And Leslie, this is what it looked like. Viewers who perhaps weren't listening that carefully to the intro given by the continuity announcer and maybe missed the idea that this was going to be fiction would perhaps have thought that it wasn't. So what's the environment? It's live TV. That's what it looks like. A live studio.
Parkinson was in the studio.
Michael Parkinson.
And there was a parapsychologist, Lynn Pascoe, who was the expert to comment, and the house was the other end of the OB unit. And Sarah Green was roving around with her camera and sound.
Describe this set that Michael Parkinson is standing on, because it's a little bit over the top, isn't it?
It had beautiful wallpaper, which was warped from actually, the photocopier. Had a fire.
It's kind of a veil. It's like, it implies
Yes.
that ghosts are always traditionally bed sheets, aren't they? Or it's kind of chiffon sheets that you can half see through. So it was a lot of that.
There's a
going on.
mantelpiece with skulls on, and above it a portrait of like a ghost with a sheet
Bed
over
sheet
itself. There's
closed,
an
yeah,
element of
yeah.
slightly kitschy quality to this set from which this live TV show is
Well, don't
apparently.
forget that Leslie was taking a big gamble, and with all the Halloween references, because we didn't have a transmission date. We all imagined that it could only be transmitted on Halloween.
Yes.
Leslie was actually making it in July. It wasn't live by any stretch
But
of the
the
imagination.
important thing is that it looked live, didn't it? And it looked like a lot of TV programmes of this period, didn't it? You were keying into something there, Leslie.
Yeah, we researched it massively. I mean, we looked at all the language of the live TV at the time, and we talked about it endlessly. And the only one that we felt we had to leave behind was something called 999, which was heavily dramatised, and those layers we couldn't cope with. So we couldn't do fact looking like drama being fact.
So Michael Parkinson's anchoring in the studio. Then there's an outside broadcast link to Sarah Green and Craig Charles as the roving reporters
Outside the house.
on the field.
Yeah.
So what are they doing? Describe what they do and the tone of what they do.
Well, Craig Charles is the cheeky chappy out there with the public and the OB unit and the guys, and having fun with the kids who are all in their Halloween gear. And Sarah Green is with Mrs. Early, who has had these terrible experiences, and her two children.
So we have a collision of styles and worlds here. We've got people who we trust and know, broadcasters operating from an environment that we recognise, and then we've got these other characters who are, we have to admit now, don't we? We have to say it, are played by actors. The Early family and the expert in the studio, Dr. Lynn Pascoe. She's not a real person, is she, Lynn Pascoe, Stephen?
Certainly not. She's come straight from the Royal Shakespeare Company, I think, but not a well-known face to the television viewing public, and that was quite important with the casting. I mean, it was cast. Leslie had a casting director who was,
Misha Gish.
used to working with the drama department. So it was cast. Casting was gone about in the usual way. But what you were saying about the cheeky chappy on the street and that kind of thing. For me, what we both applied to it, Leslie and I, was if the BBC were doing this, how would they do it?
Yeah.
So every decision we both made was on that basis. And one of the things I had a hard time trying to sell the department with was nothing must happen for the first 45 minutes. So I had 45 minutes of clues and technology and things that were going to kick off in the second half. And apart from that, you're talking about the tone. I just wanted to kind of answer that on my behalf. For me, it was setting up a sense of anticipation and hubris. There's these really smug presenters. The BBC itself is incredibly smug. Parkinson is smug. Nobody thinks anything is going to kick off. The scientists are quite cynical,
yes,
in a sense. So it was all to give the audience a kind of sense of that the scientists are kind of tackling the unknown, but they don't know what they're going to get. It was quite a game to play in a sense.
Well, let's bring in our own equivalent of Lynn Pascoe, the literary scholar Lucy Arnold. Lucy, you're a real person, aren't you?
Indeed,
you are
yes.
real. You're a real
Last time I
academic.
checked.
Yes, you're not a fictional character.
I am not.
But you're very interested in haunted houses. So what do you make of the place from which this outside broadcast purports to be coming? Read the house for us.
It would be my pleasure. So I think the first thing that we notice as viewers of this show is just how ordinary this house is. We are firmly in suburbia. It is meant to be unremarkable, almost boring. I think something that's really important is we're not meant to read this as an old house. It's not a new build, but it's not an old house. And in making that decision, the programme creators are taking us away from a traditional ghost story narrative of the country pile, the decaying family house. So that kind of ordinariness is really fascinating, but it's instantly undercut by this sense of unease and uncanniness. There's a picture on the wall on the upstairs landing of a seal, I believe. And this picture of a seal has caused huge kind of unease among people. People find the seal really, really disturbing. And I find that really
scholars of
fascinating.
Ghostwatch?
Not scholars, kind of viewers.
Yeah.
Devotees, shall I say. And I find that really fascinating of how we almost instantly start projecting onto this house this sense that all is not well in this very ordinary suburban quotidian space.
Fox Hill Drive, a very ordinary street. But the imagery that you created inside this house, Leslie, it does remind me of something. It makes me think of those photographs of the Enfield poltergeist that circulated in the media in the 70s. Those children who appeared to be kind of being thrown into the air by a poltergeist. Did you think of that kind of imagery when you were making it?
Yeah, especially around when the poltergeist was active. There definitely was inspiration to look at those pictures. That's for sure. But the seal that you've just mentioned, the dark eyes and the white of the seal pup has been. Someone talked to me about it only last week and how that freaked them out. And it's the moment you see the seal at the moment when Kimmy walks towards the curtain. So it's matched with that very tense moment. So I don't know.
Isn't a white seal with black eyes rather like the bedsheet ghost?
It's totally like the bedsheet ghost, and I think they've matched it somehow in their head somehow. But we put up childlike images, bands, fluffy toys.
In the bedroom of the two girls who are the kind of the object of the poltergeist's interests. There's also, I think, a kind of a social element to this, Stephen. When I look at those pictures of the Enfield poltergeist people, I think these people are living. The real horror of those photographs is the horrible lino and the horrible wallpaper and the awful accommodation that these people are living in. And I think you're saying something similar about the early family who want to get out of this house somehow. They're not happy in this house.
Yeah, well, I kind of wanted I suppose I wanted a kind of Ken Loach family at the centre of this, not a Julian Fellows family, just so people could identify with it, and there's people say, don't they, that a ghost story is either, Marxist or Freudian, and in a way I like to think Ghostwatch is both Marxist and Freudian.
It's also often described as a hoax. Is this the correct word to use?
Well, I would say not, because honestly, people can disabuse me of saying this, but I never used the word hoax until I read it in the Sunday newspapers the day after. It was, and it was never thought of as a prank. I go to my grave trying to defend the fact it was a drama with a certain conceit that had to be done a certain way.
Lucy?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. Something that the programme to me seems really interested in is this push-pull of scepticism and rationalism versus we want to believe it. The closing line, or one of the closing lines of the show, the penultimate line, which is Pipes speaking through Michael Parkinson.
We don't know who Pipes is yet. We shall save him for a moment.
But there's this question of, basically, you didn't believe us, did you? And so I think it's really clear to us as viewers now that there is that push-pull between the scepticism and I want to see a ghost.
I think the audience is incredibly important in Ghostwatch. One could say the audience, be it fictional or actual, is the protagonist of the drama, because they have the wish. If you think of it in Robert McKee screenplay terms, they have the desire, which is to see a ghost. And they get their desire, and it's not what they expect. So it's absolutely the ghost story format, which is be careful what you wish for. But there's a very important moment in Ghostwatch for me where Kimmy looks at the camera and saying, they want to stay, they want to see it, and it's kind of like it's prescient towards like things like Big Brother, where we really should accept responsibility for the decisions we make when we interact with television, not drama, but occurrences, events. You know what I mean? So I think there was really a subtext going on with regard to that.
There's an awful lot going on here. This is the medium commenting upon itself as much as anything else. But this isn't the form you intended to put this story on the screen in, is it, Stephen? This should have been, I think you wanted it to be a six-parter.
Yeah, I mean, I think it ended up the form it should have been. But what I pitched initially was a six-part series, more conventional film drama series. I mean, I pitched it just after Edge of Darkness, which was mid to late 80s, and my agent said go into the BBC, and I think they might be in the mood for a film drama series with the supernatural bent. So I went and spoke to the producer, Ruth Baumgarten, and of course the BBC, as ever, weren't interested. But Ruth said, hang on, there's a Screen One slot going, a 90-minute drama, and I said, well, you can't do the 6 hours in 90 minutes. But I had this idea for the final episode, which was going to be a live transmission from a haunted house, and I said, well, why don't we just do the last bit, but why don't we do it as if it is coming from a haunted house? And that's when it all really started.
Leslie, you're a drama director, so I mean, what did you know about recreating the mechanics of what appeared to be a live TV studio show with OB elements? We were out of your element.
Nothing. I knew nothing. I knew nothing about OBs. I knew nothing about studio. I knew nothing about multicam. And to be perfectly frank, I knew nothing about tape. And it was also expected to be shot on film.
Yeah, because this was a lavish series, Screen One, wasn't it? These were TV movies, really, weren't they?
Yes, they were. You know, they thought well of themselves and were highly thought of. And Richard Brooke was horrified.
The executive producer.
The executive producer was horrified that I said this has to be done on tape and has to be shot from a studio as if it's a studio, but not on one night. We shot over 4 weeks. Yeah.
And you've mentioned that there were some kind of structural models for this. That 999 wasn't one of them. Yes. It does have some of the vibe of that series, though. But I think, is Crime Watch part of it? Because I think there's one moment where Michael Parkinson parodies Nick Ross's famous "Please Don't Have Nightmares" speech that he uses to reassure Crime Watch viewers. Except Parkinson says not to worry about poltergeist because these things are very rare indeed. That's not reassuring, is it, Stephen?
Definitely not. But, we tried to use all the language that we could muster, really, in terms of the format that we were using. You know, the link up to someone that clearly wasn't in America, but, one of the psychop mob who was super skeptical, who was actually in the corner of the same studio, obviously. And
he appears to be on a live link up to America, doesn't he? As the sort of skeptical voice.
And the phone in, was a regular thing. And
there's other models here too, because I think that the TV writer Nigel Neal was a big inspiration to you.
Yeah, definitely.
The explanation of what is really going on in Ghostwatch isn't so far from his famous play, The Stone Tape.
The Stone Tape was a massive influence on me, and I think ever since seeing The Stone Tape, which I think was transmitted on Christmas Day, wasn't it? I can't remember what age I was when I saw it, but it was one of those formative moments in my life where I realised, having always been interested in ghost stories, supernatural stories, here was a writer, Nigel Neal, that I followed for a while, that actually was unashamed of the genre that he was writing in, but also was writing it as well as he possibly could. And it almost gave me permission to be serious about writing supernatural stories.
He was also interested in those structural devices. The first episode of his serial Quatermass and the Pit has vox pops in it, where members of the public appear to comment on the weird goings on at Hobbs End Station. The end of Quatermass and the Pit, of course, is on the TV version is Quatermass talking to the TV audience, I believe, which they didn't do in the cinema version for obvious reasons. Lucy, television is a medium, isn't it? There is something seance-like about it, and that's acknowledged by Ghostwatch. But that idea goes a bit broader, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I think in lots of ways Ghostwatch was developing a trend that started kind of in the 1800s. So you've got technologies like the wireless radio, the electric telegraph and the telephone emerging at the same time as belief in spiritualist practice. So these two things get meshed together. You can see that in examples of Sir Oliver Lodge, for example, wireless kind of aficionado, also the president of the London Society for Psychical Research for 2 years. So when Ghostwatch is using the television to think with us about the supernatural and how it gets into our spaces, it's really kind of one end of that kind of development of this link between the technology and the supernatural. But we see it in things like the American remake of the Japanese horror film Ringu, right, where there's this literal moment where the kind of supernatural entity crawls out of the television and transgresses this cinematic there with this domestic here, and it's horrifying. I think Ghostwatch is really kind of on the cusp of getting us to think about that transgressing of domestic and mediatised space.
Leslie, did you think you were kind of in at the beginning of something here as well? Because we might see you as the start of the found footage horror genre, might we? Probably goes back a bit further, but this seems a strong landmark.
Absolutely no idea I had no idea that where this would lead us, and found footage wasn't a word that we'd ever heard of. So it really was about delving deep into Stephen's script and from the inside out making it work.
The found footage in this is really scary, isn't it? CCTV footage of something weird going on in these girls' bedroom. But it also has, in a way, one of the clues that what we're watching is not quite what it seems, because the camera moves about, doesn't it? And CCTV cameras don't really move, do they?
Those certainly wouldn't. Those are the ones that we were using.
Well, Ghostwatch had a phone-in section. We can't do that because, well, if you ring 081 811 8181, you won't get through tonight. But there are calls coming through, so put your headphones on in the studio here. Hello, who's on the line?
Hello, my name's Kate Egan, and I'm calling from Newcastle.
Hello, Kate. What's your interest in Ghostwatch?
Well, I'm a senior lecturer in film and media at Northumbria University, Newcastle, and I'm actually conducting a research project at the moment called Remembering Ghostwatch. And
so, what have you discovered from surveying people who remember seeing it in 1992?
Right. Well, the questionnaire is still online, but we've received about 500 responses to date, and the majority of them, really interestingly, have been from people, I'd say, born between 1975 and 1984, so people who were aged between 8 and 17, 18 when Ghostwatch was first broadcast. And one thing that a number of them have pointed out was that the broadcast date of Ghostwatch was particularly special because obviously it was Halloween, but it was also a Saturday. Yeah. So it meant that many kids were allowed to stay up late as a result. So some of these memories that are coming through via the survey are saying, that this was a special occasion. Some people were watching parts of Ghostwatch while family parties were going on. Things like that. They were coming back from firework displays and putting the television on, and Ghostwatch was on. So it was a particularly sort of special night for people, I think.
And what is your sense of what did people report that they thought they were watching? Because obviously there's a lot of ambiguity about this, and the mythology tells us that lots of people really believed that they were seeing a live broadcast going horribly wrong. So what are they saying to you?
Well, I think what was really important was the context in which they were viewing it. So, as I say, these were largely people who were remembering memories of watching it when they were kids, really. And I think, their parents, the whims and decisions of their parents were coming into play here. So some people missed the start. They switched over, or their parents had switched over from something else. Or they just saw the end. They didn't. They just saw the final sort of 15 minutes of it, or they missed the end because their parents had sent them to bed, perhaps because they were getting scared. So a lot of these memories are saying that they saw it, they saw a part of it, and they then had to make sense of it from that. And there's a lot of memories of people going to school on the following Monday and talking with their friends about it. Those who had seen the end or seen the whole thing were then explaining it to everyone else, and people were discussing whether they thought it was real or not. So I think that those contexts, some people were watching it with their parents, some people were watching it on television, portable televisions in their bedrooms, and keeping the sound down low. All of these kind of ways in which it was framed for people, particularly for young people.
Leslie Manning, you're listening to what Kate is saying there. Does that chime in with your experience of its reception? Did you hear those stories at the time?
I didn't hear those stories at the time. No, I didn't. I seriously didn't know how it was being received in those immediate days afterwards.
What about you, Stephen?
Well, we started to get stories filtered back from Ruth about from the log of the BBC. People had phoned in and were quite outraged. Heads must roll at the BBC and everything like that. I think 3 different women went into labour, didn't they, that night through shock. I think one priest complained. He thought it wasn't true, but he thought nevertheless the BBC had raised demonic forces. Was one of the things.
Kate, have you found any evidence that anybody really did believe that what they were seeing was a genuine supernatural event?
Yes, some of them did, but they're reflecting on this from the present, and actually quite fond of Ghostwatch, have very fond memories of Ghostwatch because of the fact it scared them and because of the fact they thought it was real. And they felt that actually they watched it at the perfect moment, that they were at the right age for something like that, because they believed it was real. And because of that sense of excitement at getting scared and then discussing it with friends at school, that actually a lot of people who are remembering encountering Ghostwatch for the first time then when it was on in 92 are seeing it as almost a formative experience, almost like a rite of passage, because it was an opportunity to think about what being scared was all about, and that actually it could be quite a pleasurable thing to be scared, and then to discuss it with friends and your peer group. I mean, I think it was a kind of a gateway for a lot of people into a love of horror as well. So it's quite special to people of that generation, I think.
Kate Egan, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Thank you for calling in. And I think on the other line we have a Ghostwatch fan, the writer and actor Rhys Shearsmith. Rhys.
Hello.
Hello. Fresh from the set of Inside Number 9 tonight, I think.
Right, yes, yeah, we're in the thick of filming Series 8 as we speak, but I couldn't not come in and be part of a celebration of Ghostwatch.
Yeah, this is a work that's had something of an influence on you, I think, and what you do.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I remember seeing it and thinking if you could ever, it's the Mount Everest of brilliant actions of real hauntings, and we tried to get somewhere near it with our live special in 2018. So, yeah, that was what we were trying to reach for.
Can you remember watching it at the time and how you responded to it?
Yes, I can. I mean, I found it, at the time really scary. And I think I was 22. I must have been 22 or 23. And I think I remember seeing the beginning that said Ghostwatch by Stephen Voll. So I thought, oh, I'm sorry, that's my cat has just come in, the cat flap, and it's crying. Hey, Flutie. Sorry about this. He's staring at the curtains. What's the matter? What did you see? There, Flutie. I just better...
Yeah.
What the...
I think we've lost Rhys there. Sorry about that. We might try and get back to him. I think we can hear another voice now, though. Well, that is an odd one, isn't it? That voice. Leslie Manning, can you explain whose voice we were hearing there?
Yes. It was mine, yeah. Yes, we had a voiceover artist who came in after we had shot the programme and who was booked to do the ADR for the ghost voice.
And that is the ghost. That is the voice of Pipes. Pipes. A name to be conjured with, a name I almost feel is legendary among the people who are deep into their Ghostwatch lore. And in fact, I almost feel that saying his name aloud in the studio is tricky. But tell us about what sort of being Pipes is, Leslie.
Well, very unhappy. Very unhappy and very ill.
He's the haunting presence in this story, Stephen. We're told that his voice, which we just heard there, comes through one of the early girls, even if you fill her mouth with coloured water and tape it up, as Lynn Pascoe did in an experiment that seems to me slightly unethical.
Yeah, but that was taken from the annals of the SPR, the Society for Psychical Research, or some random lecture that I went to in South Kensington that I was minded to go to in preparation for this, and it just seemed so theatrical and bizarre, as indeed I think seances are so theatrical and bizarre. I've always been gripped by the idea of seances. I think everything I've written has got a seance in some form or other. But yes, that the idea of pipes really came from, I think, some random documentary that I watched, where the mother of the children said something like, "Oh, there were noises from the radiator, so we called him Mr. Radiator." It wasn't pipes, but it was something like pipes, and I love the idea of something horrific having an innocuous name, you know.
And he really is a scary presence, Lucy.
He's
Isn't he? Tell us
extremely unnerving.
how we see Pipes in Ghostwatch and how we hear him.
So he comes into being slowly and in collaboration with the audience, right? Either the literal audience at home or the imagined audience who are phoning in and describing him. So he's this kind of hulking figure with either holes for eyes or dark eyes, dressed in this kind of very ambiguous, kind of buttoned up dress. But what I think is really interesting about Pipes as a supernatural figure, he's really palimpsestic, right? On the one hand, you've got this story of this previous lodger who took his own life in the house and was eaten by his cats, really kind of visceral, nasty stuff. But then that's overlaid by another story of someone called Mother Seddons, who was a Victorian baby farmer and was thought to have killed her charges. So you've got this palimpsestic layering of these figures who pose these really horrific threats to children.
And how did you go about realising Pipes, Leslie? Because we see him in various forms, don't we? And we see him... What's so clever about this is that the audience sees him more than often than the characters do. Where is he in the drama?
He's all over the place in the drama.
He's in it much more than it was in the script, I'll say that. Leslie, being a very canny director, decided to put him in many more places, cunningly secreted in, in the background often.
We see him near the curtains. We see him reflected in a window one point. Where else should we look for him?
We do see him behind Gillian Bevan when the tape's playing. We see him.
That's Lynn, the actress playing Lynn Pascoe.
Yeah.
Up in the lights at the end.
We see him in the lights at the end. Yeah, we see him reflected in the glass.
He's
in the kitchen.
In the playground.
He's in the kitchen behind Mrs. Early in the early interview.
And what ideas did you have about who he was and what he should bring into this story? Evil.
My theory is that the most frightening things in the world are the things we don't know about. So the less we see him, the better. And when he went for his full costume and makeup, it was brilliant. But I knew straight then and there that we would see very little of him.
Because there are behind-the-scenes photographs that I've seen that depict him much more explicitly than we ever see him on the screen. I mean, in the photos, he's like this guy with a sort of distorted, scarred face, isn't he? But we never quite have a clear view of him, do we, Lucy?
No, absolutely. And I think that is essential because it allows your viewers to then project their deepest fears, their most horrifying ideas of what this figure might look like and be. And again, it's playing with that tension of we want to see but we don't want to see. We want to know but we don't want to know who this figure is.
This is Free Thinking, live on BBC Radio 3 and BBC Sounds with me, Matthew Sweet. If you want more uneasy listening, there are programmes in our vault on Varney the Vampire and Nigel Neal's Quatermass. But for now, we're tuned into Ghostwatch with Lucy Arnold and the play's creators, Stephen Volk and Leslie Manning. Leslie, where did you watch this when it went out live on that Saturday night?
At a Chiswick Sailing Club. That's where we watched it.
And were you two together?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Well, it was a kind of cast and crew screening because somehow Ruth, I think, had it in her head that she didn't want Sarah and Mike seen on the street.
That's Ruth Baumgarten, the producer.
Yeah. She didn't want the actors seen on the street because it would blow the gaff and people would somehow get the message straight to the news of the world. It was a bit. I think she was oversensitive in that regard. But
and how soon did you know that there were lots of calls coming into the BBC about this? Did you shift from thinking to look what we've done to what have we done?
So Ruth, because we put a number on the programme, we were very conscientious about that. And Ruth went to Television Centre and helped man the phones. There were two banks, one that the programme had paid for and one that the BBC ran anyway. So it was a double bank of phones. So she was there, and when she came back from that, then we realised the phones had been jammed.
What were people being told when they rang in?
That it was fiction.
but there were so many people ringing in that the switchboard couldn't manage
absolutely.
it.
I think it was manned at least partially by people from the Society for Psychical Research because
Wow.
I think Maurice Grosse was one of them. Is that right?
Yeah,
Who
it was
had
half and
investigated
half.
And my thought was, well, there's this possible resource for the SPR, and the second question was, have you had any ghostly experiences?
Yeah.
Because I thought that television could benefit, parapsychology.
So you envisaged this as a kind of data collecting exercise,
but
it went. We have to say it went very wrong. This didn't it?
Or it went very right,
Yeah.
I think.
What was it like to wake up to the press coverage the next day? Because the papers got onto it very fast, didn't they, Leslie?
Confusion. Confusion that the public was so confused, or bemused that the public was so confused, and that the tabloids were so irate. Yeah.
The tabloids are always irate at the BBC, but it was like red meat to them, I think.
They were very irate.
Yeah.
The economist in the Express, Peter Torrey, said, "How astonishing that the smug Parkinson should dismiss it all with such arrogance," because he'd, I think, said, what are people so worried about? Television, with its formidable power, should be very careful when combining apparent reality with alarming fiction. The BBC proves once again that it is out of control.
But that, you see, is a typical reaction that doesn't treat it as a piece of drama. We didn't get anyone reviewing it, well, a few people reviewing it as a piece of drama, wondering, nobody asked us, why did you write this? Why did you direct it? Why did the drama department make it? It was all about it shouldn't be allowed, And I think part of that is that some people were scared, but they're also outraged because they trust the BBC. The nub of their ire, if you like, was about the fact it was Auntie.
Do
you think, in a way, you'd played a game with that trust, Leslie?
From my point of view, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Hoax, spoof, all those words never crossed my mind, never mind my lips. It was all about the integrity of that language that I was trying to do. The fact that I'd been so pure with the language may have been a problem, but it wasn't what I anticipated. I researched the language of live TV. I researched how I wanted to tell this, and to be true to the script, and that was all my journey was to make this as a powerful piece of drama as written as I could.
Did it feel like being in the middle of a storm, though, Stephen?
You mean the aftermath?
Yeah.
Yes, it did in a way, but frustrating because, like I say, I didn't feel that people were asking the right questions or that we were being given the opportunity to give our answers. So it's like we were being blamed for a crime we felt we hadn't committed.
I want to know something about the tone of the material in Ghostwatch, though, because the ghosts are not gentle. In Ghostwatch, we hear about some quite horrible and disgusting things, don't we? We hear about spectral saliva on somebody's mackerel dinner. We hear about excrement smeared on bathroom doors. Pipes is an obscene creature, isn't he? He's a child molester. We hear about a five-year-old who was knifed, a vanished 2-year-old. We hear in quite horrible detail about a pregnant Labrador eviscerated in a children's playground by this being. This is really very, very strong material, isn't it?
The first two things you mentioned were true.
Oh.
The rest not. But
you mean true in that you didn't make them up, is what?
What were the first two?
Well, about kind of ectoplasm on a mackerel and excrement on a bathroom door.
All those vox pops were actually people's true story. But the story about the Labrador related in the playground and that kind of thing, I think it shows the power of being told something. This whole enterprise, if you like, comes from my feeling of, if you read a ghost story traditionally, it always would start saying, oh, this really happened to me. Bear with me, you're not going to believe it, but this really happened to me. I wanted to find the television equivalent of that, which of course was thrust a camera in someone's face, thrust a microphone at their mouth and ask them to tell you what happened.
You see, what I think about trying to put myself in the position of somebody who believed it, the questions I would be asking, the thing I might phone in to say would be, why is Craig Charles joking as he talks about these terrible things? Why does Sarah Green turn away the offer of an ambulance for an injured child? In a way, the questions it raises, as I look at it now, are, Why is the BBC failing in its duty of care towards the participants in this programme, Lucy?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think what you've put your finger on there is that as contemporary viewers of televised media are a lot more savvy. You talked really beautifully about this language that you wanted to get absolutely bang on, the language of live television. I think the vocabulary that we have as viewers now is a lot more sophisticated and a lot more tuned in. Maybe at the time that Ghostwatch was aired, we didn't have as much of that shared vocabulary, the idea that it was a vocabulary at all.
Also, perhaps a sense that a broadcaster, shouldn't put people in I don't know whether people are more sensitive about that now, but the idea, because part of the premise is that the BBC has really put these people in danger, isn't it? That's an unavoidable part of the drama.
Correct.
And you think people will be more worried, more sensitive about that now than they were? I just wonder whether that's one of the things that people were ringing in to say, not just "you fooled me" or "I believe this," but what's going on here? Why are these people in this situation?
Well, it's about the responsibility for trauma, especially when children are involved. I mean, a lot of people seem to think, even now, knowing it wasn't true, that somehow the children that were actors in it somehow have been harmed by the filming of it, and nothing could be further from the truth. They were delighted to be involved in it, and were treated nothing but professionally. The two questions you asked about Sarah Green, why doesn't she get out of the house, is because she's invested in looking after the children. And the other question, why does Craig Charles not react? Because he's not hearing what's going on in the house. They're kind of cogent plot points that were deliberate about the breakdown of the kind of chaos around them, really.
We're still talking about this 30 years on, aren't we? Ghostwatch has sort of haunted itself, I think. But I wonder whether does it haunt you too, Leslie?
We are surprised to be here. We are surprised to be at the horror show last night. We're very surprised that its legacy continues.
Why do you think it does, Lucy? I mean, why can we not get this thing sort of out of our system? Why does it keep returning like the spectral forces inside this house?
It is a revenant, isn't it? And I think part of it is what's at the heart of a ghost story, right? This idea of being told something, being called into a circle of people, and I'm going to tell this to you. This happened to me and I'm going to share it with you. So to come to Ghostwatch now as a contemporary viewer, you feel like you're being pulled into that fireside circle, that you are kind of in the know in a way that is really intoxicating and that is kind of at the heart of why we love ghost stories so much.
And does it haunt you, Stephen, if I can put it like that?
I don't seem to be able to get rid of it. I think when I pop off, if the tabloids have a headline, it'll be Ghostwatch man dies. I'm quite confident about that, but I hope it's not on my tombstone. I don't know what I want my tombstone. Something like, he did his best.
Why was it never repeated, Leslie? Why are we talking about something and making a big fuss of a programme that went out once and the BBC has never shown again?
I don't know, Stephen. Why has it never been repeated?
I think they just battened down the hatches with the tabloid onslaught and that kind of thing, and just, they were kind of finger-wagging inside the BBC about them having an inquiry, but which never happened. And they, I think it's just a kind of BBC reaction to things like that rattle cages, and I think that's my job, is to rattle cages to a certain extent, really. But the BBC don't like when things are, go off piste to a certain extent. But as Michael Parkinson said to us once, you've got to remember, we shouldn't slag off the BBC too much because they did make it, so I hasten to add, we're very grateful that they actually did, give it the green light and made the thing.
I've read that the One Show wanted to do an item on it in 2017 and they were asked not to. Do you think it's still a difficult subject for the BBC?
It's not a difficult subject for us to talk about. It may still be difficult for the BBC, but I sort of feel that there's a whole new generation of people in the BBC 30 years later. There's got to be almost literally a new generation of people. So I think there surely must be. They're repeating the programme.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think we fell off the air for a moment then. I'm sorry about that. Let me just ask you one final thing. Do you think a drama like this would be possible to make now, Leslie?
I don't think that this could be remade, but I do think as technology changes and moves through that we can use other technologies to scare the nation.
But do you think this something with this kind of daring, something that was this kind of close to the edge of what was allowed? You think you'd get away with it now?
You know, the great Ramsey Campbell always says that horror is the business of going too far, you know, and I'm a fervent believer in that.
Mary had a little lamb. Its fleece was white. And everywhere that Mary went, her lamb was sure to go.
Well, I can assure you all is well at Broadcasting House. In that edition of Free Thinking, you heard Stephen Volk, Lucy Arnold, Kate Egan and Matthew Sweet as themselves, and Leslie Manning as herself and the voice of Pipes. The programme was produced by Luke Mulhall.